G'day, folks. I haven't too long ago woken up from a slumber, so I slept through most of night two of the draft. So I woke up with the George Stephens pick. So yeah, that was good timing, evidently. But yeah, tonight I thought I'd do a bit of a review of the overall national draft. So my ideas are basically to go through club by club. Is there maybe a bit of a theme with how some of the teams went about their picks? Who are some of my favourites chosen from each club? Some of those best players that have been overlooked. So I'll go through the juniors from my top 50 that missed out and could present as good options maybe in the rookie draft potentially, as well as the one player in my top 20 that I think would be ripping value to say the least if he was selected. So I'll cover that. And also I might go through at the end a quick sort of winners and losers. So yeah, there's always a few of you out there that just need to feel alienated on draft day. So apologies for taking the fun away from you, but I'll try and keep it fairly sort of positive and upbeat for the most part anyway. So yeah, tonight I thought I'd go with the AFL.com version of the draft, basically because then I can just go through team by team. I think that's a pretty convenient way to go about it. So yeah, AFL.com have won tonight in terms of certainly the usability aspect for the purposes of this. So to go through team by team, so starting with Adelaide. So clearly my favourite for Adelaide is Daniel Curtin. And again, I want to congratulate Adelaide for trading up for pick 8 and really having that pre-organised and pre-arranged. Wonderful move, wonderful value. And with a Curtin, again, I'll reiterate that I think he's even got chances as a key defender to get games from next year. Maybe he even establishes himself as a regular by next year. And I think by year 2 at some stage he'll be a regular and really become quite a consistent and good piece. So that's the thing to watch out for. But in terms of an overall theme, the thing that I picked up on in looking through Adelaide's picks before creating this video is they've gone with a bit of a height theme relatively. So if we're to look at, say, Adelaide's midfield, the thing that really stands out to me is just how short everyone is. So it's really that sort of 185 and less sort of midfield mostly, other than, of course, Dawson. So, yeah, that's something they really sort of wanted to address and clearly did in bringing in Edwards. And look, maybe Curtin can sort of pinch hit through there, but ultimately I like him as a key defender, and I imagine he would see himself more as a key defender as well. So moving on to Brisbane. So they've obviously gone with a bit of a height theme here tonight, overall. And, yeah, I can't imagine really with any of the players picked that they'll be playing year 1. The only one with maybe an outside chance would be maybe a Logan Morris. And that would be really just as an injury replacement. If let's say you had a Danaher or Hipwood missing, then maybe if his form in the VFL stacking up, maybe you could consider him. But he's certainly the more immediate, more physically ready. But with the likes of Morris and Lloyd, they are sort of your shorter end of key position height. So that's the thing to be mindful of there. My favourite pick is actually their last one in Reece Torrent, where I really like the class and skills that he shows through the midfield. That's something that really stood out to me. Just that class, composure, even evasion at times was something I really enjoyed watching in 2022. I would like to see him win and find more of the footy because ultimately what he does is really good. The challenge, though, will be in Brisbane's team. Obviously, they've got a loaded midfield, so how he's going to get minutes, who knows? But, yeah, just really like him, and watch out for him in the VFL. He's one where certainly just the way he plays, I really find very watchable. So, yeah, a name to watch out for with Brisbane. But, yeah, again, really Brisbane obviously are just that confident in their list that, yeah, they don't feel they need any immediate players. They clearly feel that they've got really the group of players already established on their list that they'll be obviously going and trying to win this year's premiership with. Moving on to Carlton. So they've gone with a bit of an excitement theme, if I was to brand Carlton a bit of a theme here. And was the really exciting one, and he's the one with the scope to be playing next year potentially, where very talented forward, but he will start needing to find a bit more of the footy and hit the scoreboard more. But yeah, certainly very athletic, high leaper, great skills on both sides. So yeah, exciting player if things go right. And then Wilson can generate a bit of drive with his run across half back. So, yeah, a bit of an excitement theme. Very sort of lean draft. Not a lot happening for Carlton. And look, they're in a pretty good position, honestly, where maybe they're even contending next year. Could even be a smoky for the grand final. I think that's completely realistic the way they finished off the previous season. So, something to look out for. And the pick that certainly was my favourite with Carlton was the Moir pick. I think, yeah, he's good value there and has some real scope to develop. With Collingwood, really like both of the picks. Picking these would be really hard to pick my favourite, honestly. So I'll call it a fair draw in this instance, but really like the value of both ones. With both picks. I think it was in my phantom. I think I went with Jayath as Collingwood's first pick, and then Demadia I didn't think would be available at all. So real value picks, but the theme is a real sort of speed and excitement theme, and stylistically it really works for Collingwood. So overall, I think that's really good just with the types they brought in. And I thought really a general defender was one of the key things that should have been on Collingwood's shopping list. So they did well there. And with a Demadia, he's versatile. So he's not limited to just playing through, let's say, the midfield. You can put him forward, you can put him back if you wanted to. But yeah, another excitement machine who can really sort of take on the game, has the run. So yeah, good pieces there with scope to develop. That Collingwood are strong, so whether either of them are best 22 next year, it's going to be an uphill battle. Anytime you've got young players joining a premiership team, really. So that's something that does need to be understood there, just for a semblance of realism. Essendon, I really liked their day 2 picks. Luell is just an excitement machine where he's just so high impact per possession. He really sort of stands out anytime he's near or finds the footy. And whenever you've got a player that really heavily impacts winning, and I felt the same actually with Anthony McDonald, Tip and Woody back when he was actually drafted, where you can just really feel that impact with the way he plays. So, and look, with Luell, he plays at the other end of the ground, he plays in defence. But yeah, really like him, and if I had to pick a favourite, he's probably my favourite pick, but I really like the value of both Luell and Roberts. I think Essendon have done really well there. And Essendon, once again, have not given up on adding defenders. Their last 2 selections are general defenders. So, yeah, that's always funny to see more pieces being added to their defence. Now onto Fremantle. So they've gone with a bit of a blend of types with no so specific theme, really. So I can't really plug them down as having a theme as such. If I was to pick a favourite, I really liked their last 2 selections. I think it was actually a good draft for Fremantle. Picking between Murphy and Deline, that's hard. But Deline, I think, was... he's someone where a couple of years out, he was one of the, by far and away, the most advanced, and he can really provide an avenue towards goal and provide tremendous scoreboard impact. So I actually wouldn't be surprised if we see him next year. He's just one of those that... And it's not like he's physically big or anything. It's just he's a really good footballer. Just the work overhead. He's got the aerial work. Not a tall forward by any means, but yeah, just plays taller than his height. And yeah, he'll just take grabs, hit the scoreboard at will, would be my comment there. And Murphy I really like as a developing potential key defender as well. So at this stage, I think tremendous value. He should have gone in the first round for mine. So well done, Fremantle. GWS, it's actually hard picking a favourite out of this group because none of them necessarily represent amazing value at their picks, but the one I think represents, at least in my mind, fair value is Joseph Fonte. And having the late year birthday as well and being a competent footballer for his age, well, yeah, maybe there's something maybe he can develop in the longer term. The one thing that's interesting, just having a look at the months of birth, often you find an overrepresentation of early year birthdays. It's interesting. I'm just noticing this now as I speak, but you've actually got all the later months in the year. So that's uncommon and interesting. But with none of these guys for Fremantle, am I necessarily expecting a heap from straight away. So I don't think it'll be a difference-making draft for them, despite having the 2 picks inside the top 20. Geelong, this is a draft I liked for a few reasons, but the two middle picks are the ones that really won me over. So, George Stevens, that's the one I woke up for. And yeah, he was one that I thought was one of the. I think I might have had him around 10 in my power rankings to speak to the extent of the value he represents here. And yeah, just looking at what his numbers were against VFL competition, that's huge. And he's someone as well where he's come back from major injury. I think it was an ACL, top of mind. I think that's why he was missing in the 2022 season. But I saw him in 2021. He was playing good footy. And if he was dominating last year, which clearly he was, and even against VFL competition, he was doing very well, Geelong have got some big time value here. And they really need that youth in the midfield. And with Stevens, well, he's pretty ready to go, and he might be one where he gets some chances potentially this year if there's those opportunities that open up in the Geelong midfield. So certainly watch out, but yeah, big time contested beast, and yeah, he's physically ready to go, has the size on him. And Sean Manor, I'm really excited by this selection too. So he was my top rated mature age during this year's draft. I think I had him top of mind. I think it was 17 in my very quickly put together power rankings. But yeah, anytime you've got someone in the VFL where they're kicking 7 goals in a game and you're kicking 6 goals in a grand final across half forward, it's not like he's playing deep forward. That's ready to go, instant impact at AFL level stuff. You can put an AFL player in across half forward in the VFL and they're not kicking 6 or 7 goals in a game. That's just ludicrous stuff. So very, very few can do that. So yeah, and Manor's one where he can just impact. So really savvy pick. I like the selection by Geelong, and it's good to see them as well going with a few other mature ages as well. So yeah, you've got 2 more here that are a few years older, so we'll see if they potentially get opportunities at some stage too. So I guess you could categorize Geelong as having that mature age theme, and Stevens is my favourite with Geelong, has to be. Did I go through my favourites with these? Yeah, I believe I did. Gold Coast. So, yeah, all straight academy picks. Very boring draft. You almost question why they even have a recruiting department, or at least focusing on this year's draft, or at least relating to junior talent stuff. You could almost have them scouting the younger age groups and, yeah, pretty much forgetting about certainly this year's draft crop, unless they want to look ahead to future years for maybe potential trade or free agent prospects, at least perhaps. But yeah, there's a real blend that you'll notice with the players that Gold Coast picked. So you've got key forward, ruckman, who may have to play elsewhere to be realistic, given they've got Moyle in the VFL. So maybe that's as whether it's key defender, maybe a tall wing. They're some of my ideas. Jake Rogers as your sort of small energy midfielder, and then you've got Will Graham to generate some drive across halfbacks. So nice blend. And with Queensland talent, I find it's often more so talls you tend to get from Queensland. So often it's ruckman, sometimes it's key position players. So they're more commonly the types that come out of Queensland. So given that it is good for the Suns to get that variety overall to be able to add to their mix. My favourite pick from this group, they're all roughly worth around their pick. Hard one, actually. Maybe Jake Rogers, but with that said, Jed Walter will be a fan favourite too. But yeah, Jake Rogers, look, it is almost maybe a touch early for a small, but yeah, you'll really enjoy the energy that he brings. And with a Walter, just having that sheer ridiculous straight line speed with the size, with the aggression, with the tackling as well, he'll be a fan favourite. But yeah, for me, it's just probably a bit early to sort of be picked here, at least. For me, I had him a few spots later. Just not feeling with a key forward unless they're really transcendent on another level that they should be picked that early. But personal opinion based on how previous drafts have played out anyway. But not saying it's a bad draft by Gold Coast at all. They've got a tremendous amount of talent and they didn't really need early picks to make it happen. It was just bid matching. So given that, it is still a good draft for the Suns, just to reiterate for you at home, just in case there are any Suns fans who are worried. With Hawthorn, just thinking about, did they have a particular theme? Not really. I guess you could call it a father-son theme, where you've got the 2 father-son picks. But the one that is clearly by far and away my favourite, and will be a favourite of Hawthorn fans, possibly even as soon as round 1 next year, you've got Nick Watson. And he's just a talent around goal. I know he's listed at 170. He looked probably a little bit shorter than that when I was looking at him in 2022. So maybe he's grown 2 or 3 centimeters, perhaps. But yeah, he plays like Toby Green. So that's something to really be excited about. Plays much taller than his height. Good overhead. Good at ground level. Just brings the scoreboard impact very heavily. And he will love learning off the likes of a Luke Bruce. I think, he'll be a good player for a long time and a good player immediately, would be the feedback there. And if you're a 170 centimeter type, well, that's fine for being a small forward. You've had Eddie Betts, who might have been about a 172 and obviously had a great career, and there's been many others. Cozzy Pickett's probably top of mind. He wouldn't be all that much taller either. So yeah, you don't have to be huge to be a good small forward. If you can crumb, well, doesn't matter what height you are. Okay, on to Melbourne. So the theme here is clearly that Melbourne really want to address sort of their mid-forward connection, and we saw that as well with the Jack Billings edition as well. But yeah, with both Windsor and Tholstrup, I think that's really what they're looking for, where both of them can sort of... Tholstrup's probably more your half-forward. Windsor, you've probably got more across a wing, potentially. But yeah, they both bring a bit of excitement. They can both use the footy a little bit and do some damage respectively. So it just gives Melbourne a potential balance that they need. My favourite of these is Tholstrup, and of the two, I think he's the one where we might be seeing him potentially next year at some stage. So he's probably, more so for me at least, the one to be looking out for. But yeah, maybe there's some Vic Metro watchers who have been watching Windsor this year. Maybe he's improved, but for me, Tholstrup is the more impressive pick for me at least, and the better value one. So he's my favourite of those. On to North Melbourne. So you've got a real blend of players here for North Melbourne, and they've really clearly tried to address needs across the board. Because ultimately with North Melbourne, they've actually got, despite what probably a lot of people think, and this is to give them some credit, they've actually got a loaded inside midfield group where they've got a lot of youth through there and quite a few with potential. Not saying there's necessarily the superstar power through that group, but there are certainly pieces who can be long-term players. So that's the thing that I'd say to be mindful of. But yeah, it's essentially you've got sort of McKerchie you can play him, whether it's inside, outside. You can put him across half forward if you want. So you've got options there. Dersma, high-flying half forward. Well, yeah, they really probably do need that forward boost. You've got Goad. Yeah, North Melbourne do need a young, good ruckman, so hopefully he can be that. Will Dawson, key defender. They need that. And then Hardiman for some drive across half-back. So you've got a real blend there. To pick a favourite, McKerchie will be an easy one, and you've got round one ready. He's going to have an impact year one. He'll probably put up the biggest numbers initially from this year's draft pool. So, super coaches get onto him. Note that, same with AFL fantasy coaches out there. To pick a favourite, look, I'll try and go a bit against the grain and say that Will Dawson I like as a pick potentially here. Where I just think he's developable. You've got a late year birthday, good height, showed a good rate of development. So I think he's one where I don't know if people necessarily thought it was a reach. I recall in the Draft Phantom website, it projected him to be a late pick. So, but I want to reassure you, at least from what I've thought about with his game in terms of just the sheer rate of development and plus the late year birthday, they're ingredients that really add up well, particularly if he's performing, which it seems like he had quite a good year this year. They're ingredients that really bode well for the long term. So give him a few years, he will take his time to develop, no doubt. But potentially year 4 we could be seeing a potential good key defender. So we'll have to see what happens there. But just to give you a bit of a different take there potentially and talk about someone a bit different to who everyone else might be all excited about. And understandably, you've got pick 2, pick 4. They're the ones that everyone's going to be excited about and talking about, understandably so. Port Adelaide. So just thinking to their theme, so they're not too bothered by height given they've got 2 sub 180s. So let's call that their theme for today. But the one that is my favourite of the picks is actually Will Lorenz. So here's one where coming into the year I projected him to be a top 10 pick. Not sure what happened for his year not to be a major improvement, but it's not like he's a man-child who's physically advanced. He's actually quite on the skinny side. But yeah, good skills, moves really well, has a good all-round game. So I'm really surprised. And look, he was putting up good numbers actually in 2022, so I'm surprised his numbers didn't really take that next step this year. But I could easily see him. I'm not saying necessarily next year, but maybe in a couple of years' time, I could easily see Lorenz, whether it's on a wing, maybe rotating into the centre square a little bit too. You can put him on a flank if you want. So he gives you quite a few options there. But for me, he's a good footy player, and even a Charleston could be an interesting one as a forward. So he's one that, again, maybe give him a few years could be an interesting piece. But yeah, look, maybe with Port Adelaide having a few vacancies up forward, he might be the one you see first out of this group, would be an immediate thought there. Richmond, yeah, 2 players picked, so it's hard to pick out a theme. But Kane McAuliffe, I think, is terrific value. I think top of mind, I had him power rankings probably 11 or 12. But yeah, good, strong, ball-winning mid. Richmond do need that midfield boost for the long term, and he's one that certainly adds to that group and could potentially take over from some of the younger midfielders and potentially pass them by. So he does have that sort of ability and very immediate game. He's been good for a few years now in the Sandful. And this year just took another step in the right direction ultimately. So for me, good value at pick 40, and one of those where it's just a case of you've more years than not got good contested ball winning mids that go later than they should, and here's one that, I feel just represents good value. As I would have said with Geelong with George Stevens, I think they're 2 of the outstanding individual value pickups. Stevens even to a greater degree, given he was picked later on. For the Saints, they've gone with a clear speed theme overall. The first 4 picks ultimately were all about bringing in speed. And obviously Ross Lyon really wants to play with the idea of using that speed, whether it's offensively, defensively, probably a bit of both ultimately. He's obviously been more that defensive-minded coach, but it'll be interesting to see how he puts this group to use. From night 1, I thought Collard was the good pick, but I'm actually going to go with my favourite being Ari Schoenmaker. I think with that last pick, he's even got the scope to be the best of this St Kilda group, honestly. So I'll even go as far as to say that, which you wouldn't expect from a very late pick. But you've got essentially a super boot here. So he's not really quite a key defender. He might play a role, something more along the lines of, let's call it a Grant Birchall, where he's that almost sort of key position height. You could argue he could be a key position player in height terms, but ultimately he's a tall rebounding defender. But yeah, has the long kick, but it's a precise long kick and a good one at that. So he's, one that I'll be looking forward to watching the development of out of this group in particular, if I had to pick. But yeah, Collard will be super exciting too. It's an exciting group broadly out of these ones, but Collard close to goal as well is another that in particular for me is quite exciting to watch. Sydney, it's hard to pick a favourite, and I don't like picking an academy player, but I actually think probably Cleary is the better of the Sydney players, and he's really got an advanced contested game, and he's a good athlete as well by position. So I can understand why Collingwood placed a bid on him where they did. I thought he was worth around this position, so I think it's roughly a fair value choice, but he's the one where I think you could potentially even be seeing him next year. So that's something to watch out for if there's any midfield vacancies that open up, because he's a good midfielder, and I think he's going to have a very good year, certainly in the VFL if he doesn't get senior opportunities next year. But yeah, skills are the thing he needs to clean up, certainly from my viewing in 2022. And I can't imagine with the skill errors he was making last year that would have improved to such a degree that it has become a strength or anything like that in the last year. Usually you find that it's incremental improvements, mostly in areas of strength rather than complete elimination of areas of weakness. So I can't imagine much would have changed there. But yeah, it's sort of like a mixed group. I suppose it's been otherwise they've gone fairly tall, Sydney have here. So I guess they've gone with a taller flavour overall, and really obviously they prioritise bringing in a young ruckman, obviously feeling that's something that they wanted, and obviously seeing Green as the best available at that selection. Because yes, Sydney don't have the history of certainly picking ruckman early. Usually they more so trade or pick up as free agents or whatever. It's more that opposition list identification with the rucks that Sydney have over the years prioritised. So it's really curious to see Green this early. Clearly, they thought his development was very good in the last year to be able to justify that. West Coast, obviously all the talk is going to be about Harley Reid. I've spoken enough about him. I won't bore you with any more of that. You can watch my other videos if you want me to lecture you about how good he is. But for me, if I'm going to give you a value pick, I'm actually going Clay Hall. And here's one where, again, I probably had him, I think it might have been around 11th in my power ranking. So really good value. And here's a mid where you've got the height, so 190 is really good, but he's a contested bull. So really exciting player through there, and another potential long-term midfielder. So he's one to certainly be excited about in the long run for West Coast. But yeah, you've got a bit of a sort of different blend of types. You've got Archer Reid, who, and I spoke about in my other videos, and I've spoken about this in the past, with West Coast really liking players who have the runs on the board in years past and have been rated highly in years past. Well, Archer Reid is one of those guys who, coming into this year, probably a lot of people I'm suspecting would have had him top 10 in their power rankings, just thinking that, well, he's got the height. He was inconsistent. He was very inconsistent last year, I found, but he did have odd good games where people would be thinking, wow, he looks like a top 5 pick, and then other games where it's like maybe he's a late pick. But yeah, there was a lot of excitement for him coming into the year, thinking maybe he can take the next step. Looking at his numbers, he clearly didn't show that development. But they're a type that I find West Coast do, have a tendency to pick up on, where even if in their draft year they haven't been great, if they've had that sort of storied junior career or a year out from the draft they were highly rated, West Coast are very forgiving with those types and really have a leaning towards them more often than not. So yeah. Fact of the day for those that hadn't, I guess, put consideration into those things with West Coast. But it's just, it's a draft tendency I've picked up, and it just keeps reoccurring year after year. More years than not, you'll see it. And last year, I could even say Hewitt was one pretty much in that category, where he was very advanced coming in to his draft year and the year out, very highly rated to say the least. With West Coast, with the Western Bulldogs, I'll be pretty boring and say that Riley Sanders is my favourite, but if I had to pick another, Joel Freyer is an interesting one, where as that sort of tall winger, late-ish year birthday, I think there's good scope to develop, and I think at this sort of position, he's fairly good value too. To give you another name there. Looking for a theme, looks like they've got sort of a couple of talls, but it's a real mixed bag ultimately, where I guess you've got a bit of sort of outside run and speed with the likes of Freya and O'Driscoll, so... And O'Driscoll being the younger brother of Nathan, very different footballer, more your speedy small for those that are, interested there. And to quickly speak to those who I feel are the best remaining players before I get into the winners and losers, and you've probably picked up already on who some of the winners and losers may be just from me going through each of the clubs club by club. But yeah, so I've gone with, so my best available was Tom Lewis. So from the Sandful, just ridiculously ready to go midfielder. More tackles averaged per game than I think has probably happened in any league ever, in terms of certainly state league level and up. I think it was, from memory, it was 12.7 tackles per game, which is absolutely nuts. And then he's one of the leading contested ball and clearance players in the Sandful. So... and in my power rankings video when I spoke about him, I compared him to Tom Atkins, and I'm actually going to say he's probably a slightly better version than Tom Atkins to justify my draft positioning there. So any club needing that more defensively orientated midfielder, he would be really my first picked player in the rookie draft, it's fair to say, with some separation honestly there. And I mentioned him as someone where a team like the Bulldogs could use him. Well, if you've got the Dogs and they're really worried about, we can't play the likes of Jack McRae and Bailey Smith together because defensively we can't cover for them given Dunkley's no longer there. Well, you bring in a Tom Lewis and problem solved. It's really that simple. So that's the level to which that I believe in his game. And I could go through a bunch of other state leaguers and look in, including the other state leaguers in my power rankings. I knew going in that the majority of these guys won't get picked. And I know that just because you don't get many mature ages picked in the national draft anymore, with many of them these days really going in the mid-season draft. So there isn't really a heavy focus there. But I will, year on year, if I was to continue making power rankings, I would continue to be putting these types of names forward because ultimately they're AFL footballers, but they're just not getting the opportunities at the end of the day to actually get those senior call-ups onto AFL lists, which is really unfortunate because they're guys who could actually, in the right situations, add to best 22s. So, but to get on to the juniors, so I had 3 juniors inside my top 50 that didn't get drafted. So we've got Christian Ferranato. So, and here's one, as I said in my power rankings, haven't seen. But yeah, another of those real sort of contested bulls with a really good game. And it sounds like he's really athletic as well. So here's one where, had I seen him this year, I might have even had him top 30. And I speculate based on the level of performance. He's got the basketball background. The boxes there are tickable where, look, if he's available as a rookie, he would make perfect sense as a rookie for any team needing that inside contested bull. The other 2 I had, and I've got 2 sort of defenders here. You've got Nathan Philactes. So if I'm looking for genuine run and a real sort of enthusiasm to take on the game, here's one where I would pick him up in a hurry. And I've also got Will Patton. So here's one where sort of more that medium defender, but you can either have him whether it's intercepting, rebounding. He can even sort of defend his opponents fairly well too and negate their influence regardless of size. So you've got quite a few options there. So any of them, certainly as rookies, I think represent really good value, at least by junior standards. But yeah, I do certainly in the rookie draft advocate more often than not the state league route, where if you look at the success rates of those state leaguers selected in the rookie draft in particular compared to juniors selected in the rookie draft, the state leaguers comfortably with meaningful separation over the years outperform their junior counterparts. An interesting fact as well that for those that haven't really given this much thought, but you can have mature ages coming in. It doesn't matter what age they come in. They can come in at age 25. They can come in at age 22. Forget the age. They're actually, on average, at least based on my observations, and you can tell me at home if you agree or disagree with this one, but I actually find with the state leaguers coming in on AFL lists that they show a greater degree of development than the juniors coming in do. So the actual sheer speed of development is greater with the mature ages coming from the state leagues, which you'd think is counterintuitive given physically the younger you are, typically the easier it is for you to develop and improve in sports. But whether it's like a mental thing with the state leaguers coming in, whether it's just they've got that greater degree of application, maybe they know that their time is potentially more fleeting if they don't really extensively put in the work and improve dramatically. Maybe it's that, just to speculate on the factor. But regardless, you can bring in mature ages at really any age, whether it's 22, 25, even in their later 20s, and you can still get improvement out of them and a really good quality brand of football. So, that's just like a final thought on mature ages, just to hopefully advance your knowledge for those of you watching at home that weren't aware. But yeah, give it some thought, go through the players, let me know if you agree. You certainly don't have to. Ultimately, what I want to provoke is really just getting you at home to think about these sorts of things. But now on to the winners and losers. So, turn off obviously if you don't want to be exposed to this, but I'll do it anyway just for the conversation. But keep in mind, you don't sort of immediately the day of the draft win the draft. That's a given. It's just really based on my own rankings and my own evaluations of talent, which really lies in the 2022 seasons. So take everything I say today with an even greater grain of salt than you ever would with these types of winners and losers lists. But nonetheless, I'll do it just for fun and to alienate a couple of teams. So my apologies for those teams in advance. But it's just for a bit of fun. So the first winners I'm going with are Geelong. And the reasons being, well, Stevens, again, if he's the 10th rated talent and you're getting him at 58, that's phenomenal. So great stuff there. Sean Manor, for me, he's a first round quality talent. Yes, you can see how much older he is. So he's the 8 years older. But nonetheless, he's a baller. He can play. You don't kick 6 and 7 goals across half forward in the VFL by accident, let alone 6 goals in a grand final against a really good team. So, so really good. And I also really want to give credit to the O'Sullivan pick, where Geelong were really savvy in trading back. O'Sullivan I even slightly prefer to Nate Caddy. Not saying that Geelong necessarily agree with that, but they probably had them roughly line ball would be my best guess. And were happy enough to move back. But great decision by Geelong there, and they've really capitalised as well. I can't recall which pick it was that they used, but ultimately to get this combination of players, particularly with the first 4, I think is really terrific. So well done to Geelong. And good on you for actually picking some mature ages, because other clubs don't have that same willingness to do that, particularly in the national draft. And Geelong have done that a number of times and had phenomenal success. It's no wonder that Geelong over the years have found most of the really very best state leaguers over the years. So even just for a few top of mind, whether it's a Tom Stewart, pick 40, Tim Kelly, pick 25, you've had the likes of Tom Atkins as a rookie, well, you get phenomenal value with these types. They got Tyson Stengel, delisted free agent, I think he was. So they're the types that Geelong get, and they're the extreme levels of valuations and bargains that they get. And that contributes ultimately to premiership success and being able to make a team a contender. Moving on to the second team, and I haven't really ordered these so much. But yeah, you could almost consider it to be a rough order. Geelong certainly was the clear standout, but the next 3 I have, let's call it roughly even. So if you want to call Geelong an A+, let's call the next 3 A's if you want to give these teams some scorecards or grade cards or whatever you want to call them. But Fremantle I think are one of the winners, and I really like the Murphy and Deline picks too. Consider them one of the teams that got relative value at least in my eyes. And again, this is my opinion. Don't worry about it at home because, we'll find out, obviously, over the course of their careers how good they are. Next up, so working up the list, we've got Essendon. Again, really like the Lual and Roberts picks. They're the ones that really make this, for me, a very good draft for Essendon. And, of course, Caddy, I think, will be a potentially good footballer too. And obviously is the highest rated, and rightly so, out of these 3. But I do really want to stress that their second and third picks are certainly from a value perspective relative to where they're picking really good picks. So credit to Essendon for what I believe to be good talent ID there. So well done to, I think Rob Forster Knight is still the head of Essendon's recruiting. So he probably had most of the say, I'd imagine, with that, depending on how much, say, Dodoro wants to have. For Collingwood, I think they were the other of the teams where let's give it an A grade overall, where just relative value, but then you've also got list fits as well, just in terms of stylistic fits. So 2 with great scope to develop, particularly considering their draft positions. So credit to Collingwood. They're another of the winners. And I'll go with 2 losers. And again, apologies in advance for alienating your fan bases, but again, it's just my opinion. I'm not necessarily going to be proven right. And look, you might just get a player who comes out of this draft who proves me wrong. So don't read too much into it. It's just for some conversation, I suppose, and discussion. So with GWS, look, firstly, the trade I didn't love. Having the opportunity to firstly draft Dan Curtin, well, you've got that opportunity, which was obviously forfeited, and understandable in GWS's case if they believe that their current group of key defenders is sufficient. I can understand that. But then the opportunities presented to them was the next consideration. So obviously you had Adelaide's offer that came through. But the other offer that I would have strongly considered is the offer for West Coast's 2024 first round pick. Well, my projection of West Coast, and you can tell me at home if you think this is unfair to say, but I think it's a pretty reasonable assumption that West Coast will be, whether it's either a bottom or at least bottom 2 team as a bare minimum next year. I just think with their list position, they're overly reliant on their senior players, and they don't have ultimately that group in that sort of middle-aged tier to be able to really help West Coast be a competitive team at the moment. It's really going to be a team that's going all down the youth path. And even Harley Reid, even though I consider him by far and away to be the best in this draft, is not making West Coast a team that's better than a bottom two team. I just don't think that's a realistic expectation as well at all. So, so look, given the opportunity there was given up, that's already a huge cross for me and an opportunity missed. But also the players picked, for me, it's just, I didn't like the relative valuations either. So whether it's a Phoenix Gothard, he wasn't even in my extended power rankings. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but look, if he's not able to fit in my top 60, well, picking him at 12 is a stretch if my power rankings are anywhere close to the mark. And this year, don't read too much into my power rankings. Again, haven't watched a second of junior footy this year. Again, really want to stress that to you at home, so I could be well and truly wrong in saying this. But with a James Leake, a lot of people are going to be thinking, well, there was talk that maybe he'd be a top 10 pick. That's good value. Well, for me, I think it's closer to fair value, and even then, I don't have Leak this high in my power rankings. I had him top of mine, it might have been around 30 from my very quickly constructed power rankings. So even then I can't get excited about Greater Western Sydney's picks. So fingers crossed for the Giants that one or two of these guys develop and prove me well and truly wrong. But yeah, I'm just not optimistic. There's a difference between being not optimistic and hating. I'm just not optimistic. So just to give a fair and honest take. And then Sydney is the other one where I'm putting them in that bucket. And it comes down to a case of, it's really Will Green is the one that's particularly troubling, where, look, it's early to go for a ruckman, and I don't think his of that talent that it really justifies a pick this early. And it really speaks to a lack of faith in, I guess, the quality of the other prospects. And I can understand that if Sydney weren't all that high on the other players available. But if I was in Sydney's position and I was feeling that down on the draft, I'd personally have traded pick 16, moved back, whether it's traded, say, for a first in next year's draft and then just maybe taken a ruckman late or rookie. I think that would have been a more than sufficient way to address that long-term ruck need. Again, just if you look at the history of so many of the best ruckmen historically, they're not usually first-round picks. So, I'm going through top of mind, and you can name many more rookie rucks at home, but looking at whether it's Dean Cox, Aaron Sandilands, you can look more recently. You've got Shane Mumford, you've got Rowan Marshall, you've got Oscar McInerney. I could just keep going through the list. Darren Jolly was a great ruckman as a rookie. So, and there'd be probably another 10 plus who have been picked as rookies that don't immediately come to mind that have been really so successful that they'd even be in the conversation with those types. And you've had others going late. You'd had Todd Goldstein as mid-draft pick. You had Max Gawn, I think he was a pick 32. So they don't have to be picked this early. The only really successful ones we've had, and a lot of the ones that have gone super early, have been injury prone because they tend to get thrown in at AFL level too early and get exposed, and then at the tail end of their career it really sort of hurts them. So Brody Grundy was a successful pick at pick 18 for Collingwood, but he was on talent substantially ahead of where Green was. Where with a Grundy, I was talking about him at the time that he's a clear top 5, if not top 3 type talent in that draft. So and it was really, he slipped back on the understanding that at that time we had so many drafts over the course of time that just ruckmen weren't representing the correct value for where they were picked. So you could have the draft before Grundy was picked, you had a Dan Gorringe picked somewhere around, let's call it pick 10, thereabouts. So and then just every year on year, you had too many ruckmen going too early that were failing and not really living up to certainly the pick they were picked at compared to certainly the others around that selection. So, look, with Grundy, that was an over-adjustment for years on end. The AFL was sort of the same perspective where clubs weren't taking ruckman that early, and maybe it's just a case of clubs are feeling a bit thin on ruckman potentially with so many of those 200 centimetre types now developing as key position players. I think that actually does play quite a part in a few of the ruckmen going earlier this year, but for me, I'm just too big on really focusing on valuation and really what should be fair value. So really the ruckman being picked in, whether it's say the top 40 in this year's draft, look, I will have that level of skepticism towards all of them, and I shouldn't be spending this much time focusing on the Will Green pick, but I'm just really speaking conceptually, I suppose, to that point, just to help you at home, I suppose, understand. And look back at the history, look back at the best ruckman over the last, whether it's 20, 25 years, look at where they were drafted. See where they were drafted to determine, well, where's probably the sweet spot in the average draft for most of the really good ones to be picked. That's a worthwhile investigation, and you'll find that everything I've said basically indicates that, it's the rookies. And you can get mature age rucks as well who have been successful. So, apologies for the rant on that, but I just did want to share a little bit of knowledge on that, I suppose, and the justification around why I don't look at Sydney's draft as being overly impressive, and how things maybe could have been done a little bit differently as well. But yeah, hope you enjoy this video. I'm not planning following the rookie draft or preseason draft if there's any picks taken at all. I haven't been following to know if there's any picks planned for the preseason draft this year. I think even last year, I don't even recall if there were any taken, or maybe it was another recent draft that none were taken. But essentially what I'm thinking of in the future, and let me know if this is something of interest, but I do have ambitions. Maybe it's working in a school, I get school holidays, so I get an extended break. But I'm thinking about doing some sort of like redone drafts, but whenever I decide to do that, I really want to do it in a level of detail that is unrivaled across the internet broadly. And what I'm speaking about there is I'm really looking at, well, players, I'll even include players who could have been drafted in particular years and were overlooked. So I'll even add them into the draft pools. So that would be something else. So you could have, let's say it is let's say a Sean Manor, let's say, as a hypothetical, I was to do this at the end of next year, and he was to play 22 games this year, kicked 40 goals, and just absolutely tore the competition to shreds. Well, given he was born in 1997, well, you'd have all these potential drafts that he could have been plugged into in theory, where maybe he could fit somewhere in terms of like an updated power rankings board. So just to give you a generic sort of example about how things could look for the purposes of this type of exercise. So, and it's really as well, I really want to explore some of the themes around, well, where are the value points in the draft? What are the mistakes being commonly made by clubs? I really want to explore many different ideas associated with the draft beyond simply just putting the order together. So it's really looking at all the key learnings that you can potentially take out of it. So I just need to make a decision this off season as to whether I go about it this off season or whether it's a future off season. I'm undecided at this stage, but I am thinking about this off season, but it will be something that will take, it's probably like a 2-month exercise where I really have to spend considerable time on it. It's a passion project that I've had planned for a number of years, and with basically my time with ESPN, it was a case of I'd get to the off season, I'd just be feeling, I'm too tired, can't do it. So just completely burnt out with football and just doing too much ultimately. So maybe now that like I've sort of given everything away, I've well and truly retired. Next year I can't imagine talking about the draft to any degree because I will have insufficient knowledge to do so. For me, I've always been someone who follows the under 18s in the state leagues, as well as obviously watching a lot of AFL level play, but I've never watched a shred of under 16 football unless it's like there's an under 16 game on sort of before a game I get along to that's an under 18 game. That's the only instance I'd even see a moment of under 16. So given that it's only those that were playing NAB League last year or any Sandful or Waffle at all in the under 18 group specifically in 2022, but that's a very limited group. And about the most I can say of intelligence about next year's crop is that Levi Ashcroft is a gun, and he's basically a bit like Will, but he's also got a bit more forward craft as well. So he's someone that Brisbane fans should be excited about, and the rest of the competition should be fearing, particularly with Brisbane already a juggernaut of a team to say the least. So, given that, again, I won't have much to say about next year's draft. Maybe I'll have a few ideas that I share, but it won't be sort of going through the talent sort of player by player talking about how they play, because I simply won't be equipped to do that, and I won't be watching any junior football next year to be making any of those sorts of comments. So I'm just warning you about that in advance. But it's really, I'll be looking at YouTube going into the future as, I guess, a opportunity where I can explore concepts a bit more broadly around whether it's the draft, the list management space, and really looking at those opportunities that are maybe a little bit untapped, and I guess provide a bit of education and some ideas to further enhance the education within certainly my follower base, which I believe to be the most intelligent in football, because I find, at least with those that follow me, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on Twitter, I always find we have the most engaging conversations that you find in any football circle, certainly in the online space, just with the quality of the questions and the thoughts and where the conversations go. So yeah, I do sort of want to give back to that and really sort of keep some of those conversations going, because there's a lot of worthwhile dialogue that, yeah, hopefully carries over to a lot of other footy viewers, and hopefully, yeah, you can be the ones that educate everyone else, hopefully. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting me and getting behind me in my recent videos. I didn't expect, given, yeah, again, to reiterate, I have not watched a second of junior football this year. So to actually be getting 1,000+ views on so many of my recent videos is just staggering. So thank you very much at home for that support. And it does give me the motivation to, yeah, certainly keep producing content in the future. But do be mindful that, yeah, it will be fairly limited in scope, certainly compared to what I've been doing in years past, because I will not have that ongoing knowledge of, yeah, future draft crops. So that will be the limiting factor. But certainly trade periods I'll be across. Yeah, I'll know about all the underutilized talent that really should be getting senior games or playing out of position. I'll still have opinions and all that. So yeah, that's sort of roughly how things will look. But yeah, hopefully I get around to producing my drafts redone this off season. Apologies in advance if I don't. It will be a big time commitment, so I really have to make a big decision on that, to say the least, to determine whether I do that this off season. But if not, it will be in an upcoming off season. I'm really keen to do it. I'm very confident in saying that. So that's something to certainly look forward to, and be subscribed and have the notification bell hit in advance to look forward to it. And one last thought before I sign off for potentially this year is have a look back at my videos around Tasmanian junior football. I think they're actually some of my highest quality videos, but they're ones that haven't been viewed. And for me, they're actually ones that I did sort of, was roughly in the middle of the year, and something I put a lot of time into, and I thought was really as interesting as anything that I've really thought about football related this year. So make sure you give those a look. So it was really a 2-part series where I was looking at what list concessions that a new Tasmanian team should receive. And the second part was actually putting that list together with those concessions in mind. Because one thing I've noticed with certainly Gold Coast and GWS is, if you look at the players drafted, particularly in the early years by both clubs, the level of player development has been incredibly poor in both instances, because you've had far too many juniors picked to those clubs. So I really explore the ideas around, well, how can you make a Tasmanian team coming into the AFL successful right away, number one, but number two as well, how can we make it so that any players that are drafted there don't have their careers basically flushed down the toilet, or at least limited compared to what should really be the case in a better situation if they were drafted anywhere else ultimately. So they're just a few of the ideas that I sort of explore in that, and really, I guess, part of the basis around how I determine some of those concessions. So yeah, I'll leave a link in the description to both of those videos, but yeah, do check them out, get behind them, share it around, because yeah, for me, it was just really interesting. I'm not a Tasmanian or anything, but it's just, yeah, I just thought the idea of the introduction of a new team and what goes into it, what are some of the considerations that should come into it. I think really a lot of the fundamentals I go through in there are things that should be spoken about more in the football community, because in the future, even going beyond Tasmania, when they come in, well, I'm sure in the future we'll have more teams coming in. So I think there's room for another South Australian team, another Western Australian team in the future. Maybe we get another team somewhere else potentially. So there are things going way into the future that I can foresee. So yeah, I do believe it is worthwhile starting that type of conversation. So yeah. But yeah, anyway, folks, again, thanks again for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one. All the best.